Hope everyone is doing okay today. I am your host, Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. And I have started with the wrong image in the back. I am sorry for that. That's okay. We're going to keep on moving. We're all human beings. I am a flawed man. Sometimes less than my wife would say. So this video is going to be short also. And I apologize that I'm doing so many of these so quickly. I have a list of videos that I want to get through today, and I haven't even gotten to Brexit yet. And Brexit is going to be like 2 videos in and of itself. So for the next 2 or 3, but eventually I'll get to one where we can kind of talk and chat about the news itself. Glenn Greenwald. I've always said Glenn Greenwald is a lion. Eloquent, brilliant, and I have to be honest, I get something out of the way he phrases and articulates whatever he's trying to get across. Pulitzer Prize winning writer, if I'm not mistaken, journalist. He has been critical and skeptical of this story from the beginning, from the get-go. Now, it wasn't so much that he knew exactly whether or not the Russians did it. Most people who I listen to, or most people who come to a similar conclusion as me, didn't take the position, per se, that the Russians didn't do it. It just took the perspective that we don't know if they did. You know, if that makes sense. As opposed to the opposite point of view, where people were just kind of taking a foregone conclusion that Donald Trump was guilty. Glenn Greenwald vindicated. I mean, they were calling him a Russian plant at one point. Howard Dean, if I'm not mistaken, called him a Russian bot. This is what was taking place. I mean, so if people are wondering why people are chest thumping, why people feel so vindicated, they don't realize the abuse that people were taking for taking a contrary perspective of what the mainstream media was putting out that just so happened to be entirely, completely, unequivocally at this point, fake news. I want to talk about something that Glenn Greenwald said. I have another video of Glenn Greenwald that he says something that is amazing. That's, I guess you can say, well, yeah, of course, if they did it to Ed Schultz. But I'm not going to get into this one because I want that video to be a video in and of itself. Glenn is having a conversation, or you can say a debate on Democracy Now! With David Cay Johnston. Under normal circumstances, David Cay Johnston is awesome. Under normal circumstances. But in this circumstance, David Cay Johnston is coming to be somewhat of a cleanup man, and he has to deal with a Glenn Greenwald that's just been powered by a Mueller report that says all of this was malarkey. Now, whatever David Johnston says has to deal with that, because that is a weapon. And you could tell throughout the course of this conversation that it was used as a weapon, and David Cay Johnston was bludgeoned by it. As brilliant as he is, and as knowledgeable as he is of Donald Trump's crimes, the problem with this is that at the end of the day, you can say Donald Trump is the most corrupt man on the planet. The one thing he didn't do, though, was collude with Russia to hack the election, which is kind of the problem and why David Cay Johnston loses this debate. I want you to hear, though, the summation that Glenn Greenwald gives is damning in the way he gives it, eloquent and damning, and he gets across the absolute and complete patheticness of what was the Russia debate, or you can say what was the Russia conspiracy. Let's take a look at this, and hopefully I don't get dinged for this, but let's see. Let's go.
Not just Bill Barr's interpretation of it, especially given that Barr sought this job and has positioned himself as someone who believes essentially the president
in practicing journalism and
virtually cannot commit a crime under our Constitution, certainly not obstruction of justice.
Glenn Greenwald, your response.
This is the saddest media spectacle I've ever seen since I began practicing journalism in 2005. And what makes it even sadder is to watch all the people who vested their journalistic credibility into what proved to be a complete and total fraud and scam continue to try and cling to some vestige of credibility by continuing to spin conspiracy theories that are even more reckless and more unhinged than the ones to which we've been subjected for 3 years. The great journalist and writer Matt Taibbi wrote in an article over the weekend, and I agree with him completely, that as humiliating as the media debacle was leading up to the Iraq war, what they did over the last 3 years in the Trump-Russia story makes all of that look like a pimple. Even though obviously the Iraq war was much more destructive because it led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, the errors and lies and falsehoods and recklessness and speculation that we've been subjected to over and over and over that Robert Mueller just definitively debunked is far more humiliating journalistically, far more unjustifiably journalistically, and who knows where it will lead to. It's ratcheted up tensions between the two most dangerous nuclear-armed powers in the world, Russia and the United States, that the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists says has brought us to 2 minutes before midnight on their doomsday clock. So it's also been extremely dangerous. And
Glenn is given this in kind of a deadpan way that gives it a more damning quality to it, if I'm being honest. There are no dramatics. There's no, waving his arms. There's no anger. It's almost a certain degree of sadness. I don't necessarily know if he just doesn't feel well in this particular debate, but the style of this and the way that it's coming across works in his behalf, at least to me. This is subjective, of course. But at least to me, it comes across in a way of, this is just utterly sad and pathetic. I can't even get angry about it. It's just pathetic. Let's let him keep going. And he's also right about the consequences. This is not innocuous. There are larger consequences. Like, what do you think takes place with the energy that's created that's essentially denigrating Russians? I mean, come on. The United States interferes with one election after the next all around the world. We've been putting dictators in various countries that is brutalizing those societies. And those societies deal with the consequences of those things daily, even today. I guess I'm trying to make this point that the hysteria that has been taking place in this country over some Facebook and Twitter ads, things that countries do under normal circumstances anyway, has been way overblown and hyperbolic to this thing of, at one point somebody equated a hack that didn't exist with an attack on our nation, on the military attack on our nation. Stuff is utterly insane. Let's let Glenn finish, because I don't want this video to go too long.
In ways that we don't yet know. Let me just say 2 things. Number one, everybody knows, and I don't care how many people try and rewrite history, that the central question that everybody was obsessed with for 3 years was, did Donald Trump, his family members, and his aides conspire and collaborate and collude with the Russians to interfere in the election? And contrary to what David just said, it is absolutely false that Robert Mueller simply said there's not enough evidence to convict with a reasonable doubt. He said something much, 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 much more important than that. He said that after 20 months of investigation, with a huge team of FBI agents and prosecutors heralded as being the most aggressive and skilled in the world, we found no evidence that this happened. That's what Robert Mueller said. The whole thing was a scam and a fraud from the beginning. And the New York Times headline today says that as clearly as it can. Robert Mueller finds no collusion between Trump and Russia. That
Glenn Greenwald also says something else there that's somewhat mind-blowing. When I ask this question, is Rachel Maddow lying, or is Rachel Maddow know the truth and is just pushing for it because of political reasons? I hate Donald Trump. I'm doing the country a service by trying to take down the president. Or is it, oh my God, he really is a foreign agent and I'm pushing this narrative? Glenn Greenwald makes the case to say they already know. They knew this was a scam from the get-go. And he goes further with this, making the point that MSNBC was on its last leg and that the money that they were receiving from the level of support that they were getting from this level of hysteria, he takes it to the level of a scam. They knew it was a lie and they pushed it on their public anyway. Fucking lying. Just let them keep going.
That was the focal point of the entire narrative, no matter how much people try and change the focus. The second point, this idea that, oh, we haven't heard from Robert Mueller yet. We've only heard Bill Barr's summary of him. Yes, that's true. But Bill Barr has been friends with Robert Mueller for 30 years. They come from the same Republican circles in the Department of Justice. They both worked together at the Bush Justice Department, the Bush 41 Justice Department. All we heard for 20 months is that Robert Mueller is a man of the greatest integrity and patriotism. The idea, the very idea, just think about this, that he would allow Bill Barr to run around making false and misleading distortions about what the Mueller team found, and not one person on the Mueller team, including Bob Mueller himself, would stand up and say, wait a minute, he's distorting what our findings was. That is laughable. That's exactly the kind of conspiracy theories that led to this entire mess in the first place, and we should no longer tolerate this. Rachel Maddow and MSNBC are the Judy Millers of this story, except unlike Judy Miller, who was scapegoated for doing things that her male colleague did and had her career destroyed, Rachel Maddow will continue to make $10 million a year for NBC because she's their most valuable brand, and there will be no reckoning in consequences for this story that the media got radically, fundamentally, and deliberately wrong for almost 3 years now in a very dangerous way.
Dave.
Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. And not just, there's not going to be any consequences. Media itself is not taking responsibility for it. Meaning, I have a story that I'm going to do where they're making this case of, look, we just reported the news. We're just journalists. We don't do investigations. We just report wherever the news goes. There's no blame here. That's the position to which media is taking. There's no blame here. We're just following the story. If we got it magnificently wrong, oh well, we're just following the story. Glenn Greenwald's a fucking lion. And he's right on 2 points. When the story came out, BuzzFeed, saying that Donald Trump told Cohen to lie to Congress, the Mueller team came out to say that's not true. That is not the correct characterization of it. Like, Mueller intervened to that because he didn't want that lie to be in the public consciousness. The point that Glenn Greenwald is making is if there is any mischaracterization within this report, Mueller, of course, will say something about it, just like he said something about it prior. And there was one last point that he was going by. But Glenn Greenwald is awesome. There's another clip of him talking to Tucker Carlson where he goes further into talking about the MSNBC thing. I'm going to do that video next before I move on to the media video. So if you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all. I'll see you guys in 30 minutes to an hour. Yeah, roughly 30 minutes to an hour. Thanks all.